In this episode, we are looking at a phrase that gets repeated so often in cybersecurity that it can start to sound like marketing language instead of a serious operational idea. But for a new learner, it is worth slowing down and understanding what it really means. Single pane of glass is the goal of giving defenders one strong place to begin their work so they can see the most important security information without spending the first part of every case bouncing across disconnected tools. In a Security Operations Center, SOC, visibility is not just a convenience. It directly shapes how quickly analysts can understand an event, how accurately they can connect clues, and how confidently they can decide what needs escalation. When the right facts are scattered across too many consoles, even skilled people lose time and context. That is why this topic matters so much for CySA+, because modern security work depends not only on collecting data, but on presenting that data in a way that helps real people see what matters before noise, delay, and fragmentation get in the way. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful way to understand the phrase is to strip away the fancy sound and reduce it to a practical question. If an analyst receives a suspicious alert right now, where do they go first? And how much of the story can they see there without having to rebuild the situation from scratch? A single pane of glass is supposed to be that first strong view. It does not mean literally every fact in the environment lives forever on one screen, because real environments are too large and too dynamic for that fantasy. Instead, it means the SOC should offer a central operational picture where alerts, asset context, user identity, case details, and related activity come together in a useful way. This is important because the first few minutes of a security investigation often shape the whole outcome. If the analyst begins with a thin, isolated alert and no supporting context, triage becomes slow and inconsistent. If the analyst begins with a richer view that already connects the important basics, the investigation starts closer to the real problem and farther away from repetitive searching. That is where visibility becomes more than just seeing data on a screen. In cybersecurity, visibility means having enough relevant, timely, and organized information to understand what is happening in the environment and what that activity might mean. This is not the same as information overload. A console full of charts, maps, numbers, and live feeds may look impressive, but it does not help much if the analyst still cannot answer simple questions quickly. Which user is involved? Which asset is affected, whether this asset is critical, whether this activity is new, and whether there are related alerts already open. Good visibility answers those questions faster. Poor visibility forces people to hunt for basics while pressure builds. For beginners, this is one of the most important lessons in the topic. A single pane of glass is not valuable because it looks centralized. It is valuable because it turns scattered data into something operationally understandable, which allows the SOC to move with more discipline, more consistency, and less wasted motion. One of the biggest reasons organizations want this kind of central view is that modern security environments are fragmented by design. A company may use separate tools for cloud logs, endpoint detection, email security, identity management, case tracking, threat intelligence, firewall events, and vulnerability reporting. Each of those systems may do one job quite well, but the analyst does not experience the work as separate neat categories. The analyst experiences it as one unfolding case that may require information from all of them. If there is no central place to begin, the human analyst becomes the integration layer, manually opening screens, copying identifiers, pasting values, comparing timestamps, and trying to keep the entire story straight while interruptions continue. That is not a sustainable way to run a SOC at scale. A single pane of glass helps reduce that burden by bringing the most decision-relevant context together early in the workflow. It does not remove the specialized tools, but it reduces the number of manual jumps needed before the analyst has enough clarity to make an informed next move. This becomes especially important during alert triage, because triage is where the SOC decides whether an event looks routine, suspicious, or serious enough to justify deeper investigation. Triage is often time-sensitive, and it becomes much weaker when every alert begins as a puzzle missing half its pieces. A central visibility model helps by presenting the alert alongside supporting information that helps the analyst interpret it quickly. That may include the device owner, recent user activity, business criticality of the asset, previous similar alerts, location details, related threat context, or whether the same indicator has appeared elsewhere in the environment. When those facts are close at hand, the analyst can spend more energy on reasoning and less on searching. That is not a small difference. Over the course of a shift, it shapes how many alerts can be reviewed well, how many false positives get cleared efficiently, and how often meaningful problems are recognized before they spread. In practice, single pane of glass often succeeds or fails first at the triage stage, because that is where speed and clarity matter most. There is also a strong human factor behind the idea that is easy to underestimate when you are new to the field. Analysts are not machines, and security work is mentally demanding even before you add fragmented tooling to the problem. Constant context switching creates cognitive fatigue. Every time an analyst leaves one console to search another, then returns to a case, there is a small cost in time, attention, and mental continuity. Those costs accumulate quickly during busy shifts or during incidents where dozens of details already compete for attention. A stronger central view lowers that burden by preserving the flow of the investigation. The analyst remains focused on the event itself rather than on the mechanics of navigation. This directly improves quality because the fewer steps required to locate basic facts, the more mental space remains for pattern recognition, skepticism, and sound judgment. For CySA Plus learners, that matters because a SOC is not only about tools. It is about how humans use those tools under pressure, and good visibility design helps human defenders think more clearly when the workload becomes intense. At this point, it helps to connect the idea to one of the common platforms associated with centralized security visibility, which is Security Information and Event Management, SIEM. SIEM often acts as a hub that gathers logs and security-relevant events from many different parts of the environment. Because it collects broadly, it can support correlation, alerting, dashboards, and investigation in a way that naturally fits the single pane of glass goal. Even so, the concept is bigger than any one product category. SIEM can be central without being sufficient by itself. The SOC also needs case data, asset context, identity detail, and threat relevance in forms that are usable and timely. That means the real success of a single pane of glass is not measured by whether the organization owns a SIEM. It is measured by whether the central view actually helps analysts understand what happened, who is affected, whether similar activity exists elsewhere, and what the likely next step should be. The technology matters, but the operational usefulness matters more. Correlation is one of the reasons a unified view becomes so powerful. Most important incidents do not appear as one dramatic event with a clear label that says compromise has occurred. Instead, they often emerge from a sequence of smaller signals that only become meaningful when connected. A suspicious login may not be enough by itself. A strange process on an endpoint may not be enough by itself. A phishing email reported by one user may not be enough by itself. But if the same user later shows unusual authentication activity and the same asset triggers a follow-on alert, then the story changes. A well-designed central view helps the analyst see those relationships faster. That is the real power of visibility in the SOC. It allows patterns to emerge from separate clues that would otherwise stay isolated in different tools. This is why a single pane of glass is not simply a dashboard idea. It is an investigative idea. The goal is to help analysts see the case as a developing whole rather than as disconnected fragments scattered across the security stack. Case management and team coordination also benefit enormously from stronger central visibility. SOC rarely works as a single uninterrupted line of one analyst handling one case from beginning to end. Cases are handed between shifts, reviewed by more senior staff, escalated to incident response, or discussed with identity teams, infrastructure teams, or management, depending on what is found. If the most important context lives partly in a ticket, partly in an alert console, partly in separate lookup tools, and partly in someone's memory, then handoffs become slower and less reliable. A stronger central view helps preserve continuity. It gives the next person a clearer place to understand the current status, what evidence has already been reviewed, which hypotheses have been ruled out, and why the case is moving in a particular direction. That consistency improves not only speed, but trust. Teams work better together when everyone is looking at a shared, structured picture of the event rather than reconstructing it from partial notes and disconnected sources each time responsibility changes hands. A single pane of glass also supports leadership and reporting in ways that are easy to overlook if you focus only on frontline investigations. Managers and security leaders need visibility into the health of the operation itself. They need to understand alert volume, case aging, recurring patterns, incident severity, workflow bottlenecks, and whether the SOC is spending too much time on low-value noise. A fragmented environment makes that very hard. Data may exist in multiple systems with inconsistent terminology and incomplete context, making it difficult to translate operational activity into clear management insight. A central visibility model helps by creating a more stable way to observe the operation, not just the attack data. That allows better reporting, better staffing decisions, better tuning of workflows, and better conversations with business leaders about where risk and effort are concentrating. In that sense, the single pane of glass helps the SOC look outward at threats and inward at its own performance. Both types of visibility matter if the organization wants not just to investigate alerts, but to improve how the entire defensive function works over time. Still, one of the most important truths about this topic is that the phrase can be misleading if people expect it to mean perfect knowledge. No screen, no matter how well designed, can fully eliminate uncertainty from cybersecurity. A central console is only as good as the data feeding it, the integrations behind it, the normalization of that data, and the logic used to surface what seems most relevant. If critical log sources are missing, if cloud activity is poorly ingested, if enrichment fails, or if asset ownership data is stale, the central view may look polished while still hiding important gaps. That creates a dangerous illusion of control. Mature teams avoid that trap by treating the single pane of glass as a working operational layer, not as a guarantee of complete truth. Analysts still need curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to validate what they are seeing. The central view should reduce confusion, not replace judgment. This is a vital CySA Plus lesson because security tools are most dangerous when they make people feel certain without earning that certainty through solid underlying data and disciplined interpretation. The idea becomes even more relevant in modern environments where the SOC must see across cloud services, remote endpoints, software as a service platforms, on-premises infrastructure, and identity systems all at once. In older models, security teams could imagine a fairly stable boundary around the environment and focus heavily on network-centered visibility. That world has changed. A suspicious event now might begin with a cloud identity, continue on a remote laptop, touch a shared collaboration platform, and create evidence in a case management system within minutes. If the central visibility model cannot connect those domains, analysts are forced back into fragmentation right when the organization most needs coherence. This is why the phrase single pane of glass has stayed popular even though it is sometimes overused. The underlying problem is real. Security information lives everywhere, and modern defense requires a way to bring the most important parts of that information together fast enough for people to use it meaningfully. Without that, even a well-funded SOC can become operationally clumsy despite owning many capable tools. It is also important to understand that building toward a useful central view is usually an incremental maturity process rather than a one-time technology purchase. Organizations often begin with separate systems that each provide value, then slowly improve integration, enrichment, alert quality, asset context, and case handling over time. The best progress usually comes from asking operational questions rather than chasing slogans. What facts do analysts always need first? Which repeated manual lookups slow every investigation? Which handoffs lose context? Which alerts remain hard to interpret without opening 5 more tools? When security leaders answer those questions honestly, they can design a better central view based on real workflow pain rather than on a theoretical idea of what a dashboard should look like. This matters because good visibility grows from real use. The SOC does not need a pretty screen. It needs an operational surface that reduces friction, supports sound tree-off, and helps the team understand the environment in a way that makes faster, more accurate action possible. There is also a healthy balance to strike between centralization and depth. Analysts need a single strong place to begin, but they also need the ability to dive into specialized tools when a case requires deeper examination. A central view should simplify the start of the investigation and preserve the shared picture of the event, but it should not pretend that every detailed action belongs on one screen forever. The most mature environments respect that balance. They make the beginning and coordination of analysis easier while preserving the deeper technical paths needed for specialized review. That is why the best way to understand single pane of glass is not as one magical screen that replaces everything else. It is better understood as a deliberate effort to make the SOC more coherent, more navigable, and more humane for the defenders working inside it. The central view gives the team a stronger first picture and a stronger shared picture, while deeper tools remain available when the investigation demands more detailed technical work. By the end of this discussion, single pane of glass should feel less like a buzzword and more like a serious design goal for visibility in the SOC. It is really about giving analysts a central, useful operational picture so they can triage faster, connect events more effectively, hand off work more cleanly, and manage their attention more intelligently under pressure. It does not mean every piece of data belongs on one screen, and it does not promise perfect awareness. What it does promise, when done well, is a better starting point and a better shared picture of security activity across a complex environment. For a CySA Plus learner, the most important takeaway is that visibility is not the same thing as volume. Strong visibility means the right information appears in a usable way at the moment it is needed. When a SOC gets that right, it becomes more than a collection of tools. It becomes a place where defenders can actually see clearly enough to do their job well.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.